There are thoughts you've had that you've never spoken aloud, not because they're forbidden, but because you suspect no one would know how to respond. You've wondered what it would feel like to disappear not physically, but existentially. To dissolve into the background of a world that doesn't seem built for minds like yours. You've stared at a sunset and felt an ache, not awe. You've looked into the eyes of someone who says they love you and wondered if either of you truly understands what love even is. You've questioned why you exist not casually, but with a strange, almost desperate urgency. And yet, when you try to share these thoughts, something strange happens. The room stiffens. The conversation shifts. People nod with polite discomfort, then return to safer, smaller things. So you stop sharing, not because the thoughts go away, but because you begin to realize something. Most people are not built to hold depth. They want answers, not questions. They want comfort, not clarity. They want certainty even if it's fake. But you want truth, even if it shatters you. What kind of mind chooses the storm over shelter? There's a peculiar loneliness that comes with thinking too deeply. Not because you lack company, but because your mind moves in ways others don't understand, or worse, don't even notice. You pick up patterns in speech, subtext in silence, and contradictions hiding in plain sight. You hear what people say, but also what they're running from. You feel haunted, not by ghosts, but by questions that don't die. Why do people chase things they know won't fulfill them? Why do we build lives we secretly want to escape? Why does society punish honesty and reward performance? Why are we more afraid of introspection than destruction? These aren't shower thoughts or philosophical musings. These are psychic pressure points. And if you're one of the rare minds that thinks this way, you've probably already noticed something unsettling. The deeper your thoughts become, the more the world stops making sense. You start to see the absurdity in normal things. People applauding success that feels hollow. Traditions passed down like rituals, stripped of meaning. Relationships built more on need than understanding. Even your own identity begins to feel like a costume that's grown tight and itchy, something you put on each morning to survive the expectations of others. And then comes the fracture, the slow, painful realization that you are split between two worlds. One is external, loud, fast, marketable, safe. It rewards conformity and penalizes depth. It praises the appearance of confidence and punishes visible vulnerability. The other is internal, quiet, raw, piercing. It asks uncomfortable questions. It mourns the superficial. It seeks meaning, not distraction. The problem is, you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow the falseness in a compliment, the emptiness in applause, the subtle manipulation in the way people say, just be yourself, when they mean, be convenient. And you begin to wonder, is there something wrong with me, or is there something deeply wrong with the world? This question has haunted thinkers for centuries. Jung called it individuation, a painful but necessary process of breaking from the collective to find your true self. Nietzsche saw it as the price of becoming who you are in a world that demands obedience. Schopenhauer believed the more one thinks, the more one suffers. So then, what is deep thinking? Is it wisdom or a form of existential illness? Is it a higher awareness or a slow poisoning of the soul? Does it connect you to truth or sever you from the very things that make life livable? And perhaps most disturbing of all, what if the clarity you seek will never bring peace but only more questions? You begin to suspect that the mind isn't meant to hold this much weight. That maybe there's a reason others stay distracted. Maybe we're not built for this level of awareness. But it's too late now, isn't it? The descent has already begun. The layers are peeling. The illusions are cracking. And the one thing you use to trust your own thought shave now become both your compass and your tormentor. Still, there's something else. A pull, a whisper, a sense that behind this tension, behind the chaos of thinking too much, lies something undeniably real. You can feel it, like a truth hiding behind a curtain of noise. But to reach it, you must go deeper, not into the world, but into yourself, into the roots of this unrest, into the psychological and philosophical machinery behind the very way you think. Because until you understand why you think the way you do, you will always mistake your gift for a curse. And what you'll find next may not comfort you, but it will awaken you. There's a peculiar contradiction at the heart of deep thinking, one so subtle it often goes unnoticed, yet powerful enough to fracture the self. You seek truth, but the more truth you uncover, the less you feel at home in the world that surrounds you. Why? Because most of the structures, mental, social, cultural, aren't built for people who think this deeply. And herein lies the hidden problem. The deep thinker lives in a reality at odds with consensus reality. And consensus reality is ruthless. It whispers through every ad, every social norm, every rule of etiquette. Don't question too much. Don't feel too deeply. Don't go too far. Smile. Conform. Stay in line. But deep thinkers were never built for lines. Their minds are wired not for comfort, but for penetration. They cut through illusion like a blade through silk. And what they find beneath often isn't pretty. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But you face it every day. You dive into the chaos within. You excavate the uncomfortable. You challenge your assumptions. You stare into the void and try to sketch its contours. This isn't a hobby. It's a compulsion, a calling, and often a curse. You didn't choose this path because it's fashionable. You were dragged into it by trauma, by isolation, by loss, or simply by a mind that refused to stop asking, what is this all for? But there's a psychological cost to this awakening. The more awake you become, the more alienated you feel. Not because people are cruel, but because they are afraid. Afraid of introspection, afraid of pain, afraid of looking in the mirror without their masks. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote of bad faith, a kind of self-deception where people live as if their choices don't matter, as if they are just actors in a script written by society. Deep thinkers don't have that luxury. They know every decision, every belief, every self-justification is a choice. And with that awareness comes existential terror. It's not just that life is short. It's that life is a blank canvas offering no meaning unless you paint one yourself. But painting requires courage. It requires confronting the void. And many would rather watch than create, consume rather than question, sleep rather than awaken. And so you begin to see the hidden architecture behind most lives. People aren't seeking truth. They're seeking relief. Relief from confusion. Relief from responsibility. Relief from the vast, unanswerable question. What do I do with the freedom to shape reality? Arthur Schopenhauer didn't sugarcoat it. He believed life is suffering driven by endless desire, only briefly soothed before another hunger emerges. And the more one reflects, the more unbearable this pattern becomes. Deep thinkers, he believed, suffer more, not because they're weak, but because they're awake. They've seen behind the curtain. So let's ask, what causes this kind of thinking? Psychologically, it can be traced to several sources. Hyper-awareness. The deep thinker's brain doesn't just process information, it synthesizes, connects, questions. This makes them excellent at pattern recognition, but also prone to rumination, doubt, and overanalysis. Emotional intensity. Many deep thinkers feel more acutely than others. They aren't just mentally deep, they're emotionally porous. A single offhand comment can echo for days. A moment of beauty can feel holy, but so can a moment of despair, existential anxiety. They are rarely satisfied with surface-level answers. While others ask how, deep thinkers ask why. And that why leads to disturbing territory questions that don't resolve, dilemmas that can't be neatly packaged. But the roots go even deeper beyond psychology, into the realm of existence itself. In the myth of Sisyphus, Albert Camus described the human condition as absurder desire for meaning constantly crashing against a silent universe. Most people solve this by embracing false certainty. Religion, ideology, nationalism, careerism. Deep thinkers often can't do that. They see the scaffolding. They sense the fiction. This doesn't make them better, just more exposed to despair, but also to insight. You begin to sense it. Deep thinking isn't just mental. It's existential disobedience. It's rebellion against the sleep of the herd, against the seduction of comfort, against the hypnotic rhythm of routines that promise stability at the cost of the soul. But rebellion always has a price. You start to feel out of sync with your peers. Your relationships strain under the weight of your intensity. Your joy becomes more nuanced, less ecstatic, more solemn. You stop being able to enjoy the things others do, not out of superiority, but because you can see through them. You see the manipulation in marketing, the hollowness in virtue signaling, the shallowness of outrage culture. You don't want to live in irony, but sincerity is punished in this world. So where does that leave you? Trapped between two needs. The need for truth and the need to belong. Most people sacrifice truth for belonging. Deep thinkers often sacrifice belonging for truth, and it costs them loneliness, confusion, exhaustion, a chronic ache that whispers, there must be more, but what? This is the hidden problem. Not just that the deep thinker sees more, but that the world punishes them for it. Labels it depression, overthinking, antisocial behavior. As if clarity were an illness, as if sensitivity were a defect. But what if it's neither? What if the deep thinker isn't broken but unfinished? What if this fracture, this exile, this discomfort is not the end but the beginning? Because beneath all this suffering, all this questioning, there is something ancient forming, an inner rebellion, a shift, a new way of being. But to reach it, you must first understand the unseen consequences of staying where you are. Because this isn't just uncomfortable, it's unsustainable. The very mind that seeks freedom can become its own prison. In the next chapter, it will show you how. At first, deep thinking feels like a gift and ability to see what others can't. But over time, it can begin to feel like a labyrinth. You don't notice it right away. The walls rise slowly. The corridors twist incrementally, but one day, you realize you're walking in circles. The questions haven't vanished, they've multiplied. And the deeper you go, the more disoriented you become. You thought depth would liberate you, but now, it feels like you're trapped in a house with too many mirrors and none of them show you how to get out. This is the paradox. Deep thinking begins as freedom and ends, often, in paralysis. You start to notice things others ignore. The linguistic manipulation in politics, the manufactured outrage in media, the transactional nature of most relationships. At first, this feels empowering, enlightening, even thrilling. But clarity, when not paired with connection, leads to fragmentation. You start withdrawing, not because you hate people, but because you can't bear how hollow things feel. Small talk becomes painful. Crowds become overwhelming. Laughter at shallow jokes feels like an insult to your nervous system. You're not above it. You just don't know how to exist inside it anymore. So you begin to shrink your world. Quietly, strategically, fewer social events, less interaction, more time alone enough to escape the world, but because being in it now requires acting. And acting, for a deep thinker, feels like spiritual suffocation. But isolation has consequences. The less you speak, the harder it becomes to be understood. The longer you spend in your inner world, the more foreign the outer world becomes. You start to feel like an alien trapped in a species that values momentum over meaning. And that alienation, if left unprocessed, can mutate into something darker. Self-doubt. What if I'm not deep, just broken? What if I'm not perceptive, just paranoid? What if all this thought isn't wisdom but self-sabotage? The human mind has a cruel tendency. When it cannot locate belonging externally, it turns against itself. You begin to second-guess your insights, to downplay your intensity, to wonder if maybe everyone else is right, and you are simply too much. But here's the hidden danger. When a deep thinker invalidates their own depth, they sever their connection to inner truth. And the moment that severing occurs, a strange kind of soul death begins. You still function, you smile, you meet deadlines, but behind your eyes something flickers, a light dimmed by 1,000 small compromises. You stop expressing. You become agreeable. You nod when you want to scream. And worst of all, you begin to perform. Not just for others, but for yourself. This is not just a personal issue. It's a psychological epidemic that shapes entire cultures. Because society doesn't just marginalize deep thought, it commodifies its opposite. Simplicity is marketable. Certainty is sexy. Distraction is profitable. And the world is designed to reward these things. We celebrate quick takes, not considered truths. We prize charisma over character. We treat introspection as indulgence and emotional nuance as weakness. In such a world, the deep thinker is not just out of place, they're structurally disadvantaged. Psychologically, this creates what Viktor Frankl called the existential vacuum state, where one cannot find meaning through socially approved roles, and so drifts into apathy, addiction, or despair. Philosophically, it creates what Kierkegaard described as the sickness unto death, not the loss of life, but the slow erosion of selfhood through disconnection from one's inner essence. And neurologically, the effects are tangible. Chronic overthinking activates the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for internal monologue and self-reflection. In moderation, it fuels creativity, but in overdrive, it becomes a breeding ground for anxiety, insomnia, and even dissociation. Your mind becomes a closed loop. Every insight breeds a new doubt. Every answer fractures into more questions. And worst of all, you begin to fear that there is no exit. That perhaps the cost of seeing clearly is the inability to live simply. This is where the line between depth and dysfunction begins to blur. Many deep thinkers suffer not because they're wrong, but because they're alone in their rightness. Because no one mirrors their thoughts back to them. No one validates their perception. No one says, yes, I see it too. And so the consequences pile up. Relationships falter not due to lack of love, but a lack of resonance. Passions fade not from laziness, but from chronic disillusionment. Mental health declines not from inherent illness, but from intellectual starvation. The deep thinker is starving, but not for food, affection, or status. They are starving for authentic meaning, for conversations that don't make them feel insane, for truths that don't require censorship, for people who don't treat their depth as a threat. And without that nourishment, the most gifted minds become casualties of their own awareness, not because they failed to adapt, but because they were never meant to adapt to a world that worships shallowness. This isn't hopelessness, it's a warning, a plea for recognition. Because deep thinkers are not flawed versions of normal people. They are necessary anomalies, the ones who ask what others refuse to, who feel what others bury, who see the fault lines before they rupture. But for that to matter, for that to heal, rather than harm, a shift must happen. A rebellion, not against the world itself, but against the internalized belief that you must shrink to survive it. Because you were never meant to live safely inside your thoughts. You were meant to build a life with them and beyond them. But to do that, you'll have to break every rule you were taught about fitting in. They told you that peace comes from acceptance. They forgot to mention that some things should not be accepted. That numbness is not serenity. That conformity is not wisdom. That adapting to a broken system is not a virtue. It is a slow death of the soul. You've been taught to pathologize your depth, to see your questioning as a flaw, your intensity as a dysfunction, your silence as a problem. But what if it's the world that's sickened? Your unrest is the beginning of healing. The rebellion begins the moment you stop apologizing for your perception, because that is what this war has always been about. Perception. The deep thinker sees more, and what they see cannot be unseen. So the first act of defiance is simple, but radical. Trust your perception again. No, you're not crazy for sensing that a conversation is empty. You're not difficult for refusing to pretend. You're not broken because you cry at the sight of subtle beauty or subtle cruelty. The world has trained you to doubt your radar, but that radar is your birthright. You were not meant to think like everyone else. You were meant to disrupt, distill, deconstruct, rebuild. But the rebuilding must begin within. And that means dismantling every internalized lie that says your depth is too much for this world. Let us go further. Rule 1. Break the tyranny of productivity. The modern world reduces everything: thoughts, feelings, people to outputs. If it doesn't generate profit, status, or content, it's seen as waste. Deep thought doesn't obey this logic. It's nonlinear. It's slow. It meanders. It asks questions that don't resolve. And in a culture drunk on dopamine and deadlines, this looks like idleness. But let this be your rebellion. Be slow. Be still. Be useless. Let your mind wander without the leash of outcome. Let your curiosity move without the need for a result. Wisdom is not produced, it is cultivated. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But how do you find your why if you're too busy chasing the how? Step back. Not to escape, but to return to yourself. Rule 2. Unlearn the fear of being misunderstood. You've tried to explain yourself 1,000 times. You've diluted your language, softened your edges, hidden the full weight of your ideas behind half smiles and disclaimers. But it never quite lands, does it? Here's the truth. Not everyone is meant to understand you. And that is not a tragedy. That is liberation. Because the more you explain yourself to those who cannot hear you, the more you begin to edit your soul to fit their frequency. The rebellion is this: speak in your full voice, or don't speak at all. Let silence be your boundary. Let solitude be your sanctuary. Let your untranslatable thoughts be sacred, not shameful. You are not a malfunctioning extrovert. You are a philosopher, a watcher, a seer. You don't need more followers. You need resonance. One true connection is worth more than 1,000 polite misunderstandings. Rule 3. Turn thought into praxis. Here's where most deep thinkers get trapped. Thought without embodiment. You analyze the human condition, yet forget to feed your own body. You ponder mortality, yet neglect your breath. You study the mind, yet live in it like a locked room. The rebellion demands integration. If you read about beauty, seek it. If you study mortality, live urgently. If you understand suffering, create joy. Not just theories about its absence. Knowing is not enough. thinking is not enough. Sartre said that existence precedes essence, meaning you must act your way into becoming. And for the deep thinker, this means creating rituals that ground your intellect into life itself. Walk, paint, dance, cry, build, burn, write. Thought must move, otherwise, it collapses into abstraction. And abstraction is a beautiful coffin. Rule 4. Protect the sacred. You live in a world where everything is exposed, where every private emotion becomes a post, every insight a tweet, every pain a performance. But the deepest truths lose power when shared too soon, too publicly, too often. Your rebellion is not only in what you express, but in what you refuse to. Protect your sacred thoughts. Let them mature in silence. Not everything must be shared. Some truths are meant to ferment in solitude, until they become wine you offer only to those who can taste it. In a loud world, mystique is resistance. Rule 5. Reclaim wonder. This might be the most radical act of all. Allow yourself to wonder again, because somewhere along the line, your thinking turned cold, detached, analytical, defensive. You began to anticipate ridicule. You armored your thoughts, and slowly, thinking became survival, not exploration. But beneath the armor, you still long for awe. So let yourself be moved. By light through a cracked window, by a line of poetry you don't understand, by a stranger's eyes that carry grief you recognize, by your own heartbeat reminding you you are still here. Wonder is not naivety. It is the courage to feel despite knowing how dark the world can be. And perhaps that is the final rebellion. To feel deeply anyway. To love anyway. To live, not as a defense but as an offering. So what now? You've seen that your pain is not madness, it's misplacement. That your isolation is not failure, it's clarity without context. That your mind is not your enemy, it's a blade that must learn when to cut and when to carve. You are not here to be understood by all. You are here to be deeply, fiercely, authentically yourself. And when that happens, when a deep thinker comes home to their own mind, something extraordinary occurs. They stop trying to escape thought, and instead, they transcend it. That's where we're going next. The final revelation, the truth behind the truth, the ultimate insight that makes every struggle, every silence, make sense. Are you ready? You were never just thinking, you were building. Every sleepless night, every spiraling question, every ache that came not from your body, but from some place, thought itself couldn't reach you, were constructing something, not a theory, not an ideology, a self, but you were doing it backward. You thought the mind would lead you there, that if you could think deeply enough, widely enough, clearly enough, you would arrive at some final answer, the capital T truth, the perfect philosophy, the flawless belief system, the key that would unlock reality and stop the spinning. But the truth, Isand, has always been there, is no final thought. There is only the thinker, and you are not your thoughts. You are the one who chooses which thoughts to believe. Let that sink in. You are not the stream of analysis, fear, fantasy, and complexity racing through your mind. You are the architect behind them, the one deciding which bricks matter, the one who chooses what the house of your consciousness will become. This is the most radical realization a deep thinker can have. That thought is a tool, not a truth. A lens, not the light itself. The mind is seductive. It will tell you that the right thought will save you. It won't. No thought is large enough to hold your full aliveness. No mental structure is strong enough to carry your full paradox. Your liberation was never going to come from mastering thought. It was going to come from transcending its grip. And here's how you do that. True realization. 1. Thought is a mirror, not a master. Thought reflects, but it does not generate truth. It mirrors your fears, your past, your conditioning. It mirrors your emotional state, your nutrition, your memory, your trauma. But it is not the origin of reality. It is not you. When you mistake the mirror for the self, you spend your life rearranging reflections, polishing glass, hoping to change what it shows. But the rebellion is this: step back. Stop trying to fix the mirror. Touch the face it reflects. Who are you beneath the thought? You are the stillness watching it. You are the awareness witnessing it all. And once you feel this, not as an idea, but as embodied knowing, you stop being controlled by your thoughts. You begin to play with them instead. Realization. 2. Not every thought deserves a home. Your mind is like a cathedral with open doors. Thoughts wander in like vagrants. Some are wise. Some are wounded. Some are dangerous. And you let them live there. You let anxious thoughts build altars. You let shame graffiti the walls. You let past voices echo in the nave of your inner world, unchallenged, uninvited, unverified. But you are the architect. You get to decide which thoughts stay, which are questioned, which are burned, not with violence but with clarity. Deep thinkers are not meant to hoard thoughts. They are meant to curate them like art, like fire, like medicine. Stop believing that every idea deserves your loyalty. Let some thoughts pass like weather. Let some die unnamed. Not all truth must be kept. Some truths must be released to make room for something higher. Realization. 3. Your questions were never meant to end. And here's the hardest truth. You will never find all the answers. And that is a gift, not a flaw. Because the human soul was not built for resolution, it was built for relation. The goal of thinking is not to dominate the world with knowledge. It is to relate to the world with depth. That's why the greatest minds were not the most certain. They were the most curious. Einstein, Rilke, Jung, Huxley, Frankl. They circled their questions like sacred fires, never extinguishing them, only honoring them with each passing year. What if your suffering came not from thinking too much, but from thinking you had to resolve everything alone? The deepest thinkers are not those who answer everything. They are those who become intimate with the unknown, who make peace with mystery, who realize, I do not know is not an end. It is a beginning, a portal, a doorway back to wonder. Realization, sa. You are not alone. Here's the quiet truth beneath all of this. You were never alone in your depth. You felt alone because deep thinkers have been scattered, isolated by culture, separated by speed, diluted by noise. But you are not rare. You are part of an ancient lineage of minds who have always lived at the edge of the known philosophers, poets, mystics, architects of perception. They walked the same haunted roads. They wept the same unwept griefs. They asked the same forbidden questions. And now they echo through you. You carry their frequency, their inheritance. You are not alone. You are a continuation. And that means you are also a bridge. You do not just think for yourself. You think for the world. You sense things before others do. You name things others haven't faced yet. You are the cartographer of collective shadows. And your greatest gift is not just in what you see. It's in what you become when you stop hiding from that sight. So, here you are. The mind still buzzing. The questions still alive. But something inside you has shifted. You've seen the architecture. You've seen the wound, the trap, the silence, the key. You've touched the walls of your own labyrinth. And now, you are stepping out, not by escaping thought, but by standing above it. You are no longer drowning in the deep. You are diving with purpose. You are the diver and the surface. So go. Think bravely. Speak rarely. Wonder often. And when you forget, because you will return here, not for answers, but to remember that there is a center inside you that thought cannot reach. And it is from that center that the deepest thinkers finally learn to live.